What's the most fucked up thing you've seen at a friend's house? His mom was single and had a different boyfriend every other month. She would always walk around naked and have loud sex with her boyfriend while the door was open. It was awkward as fuck to play Halo with my friend knowing his mom is getting railed upstairs. We were like 8 by the way. My friend lives in the basement and his parents are hoarders, so he has to walk through a tunnel of car parts, furniture, Christmas decorations, moldy clothes, and dried dog shit just to go upstairs to use the bathroom. There is a bathroom downstairs, but they didn't seem it important enough to fix for him. And when you come over, you can tell when they've tried to fill his mostly clean room with junk again and he's had to push it back out onto the piles. I grew up like that. Tried so hard to keep the space for myself as relatively clean as I could. But you also don't learn a lot of good habits being raised like that. Cleanliness and hygiene really didn't take until I moved out for college. I had a friend who lived on his own in high school and we partied there a lot. He had a revolving door of roommates to help with rent. One of those roommates was a pretty serious drug dealer. He was extremely paranoid and rarely spoke to us besides threats. He had threatened, that no one ever go in his room and it was always locked. Well, one day he got arrested and had pounds of drugs in the car. Off to jail. He had communicated through family again not to enter his room and eventually his family would come get his things. Weeks went by and a strange smell started coming from the locked room. This dude and his family were super scary so we didn't want to fuck around and find out. But finally my friend was like, WTF is this smell? Maybe it's trash and I can get it out of here without touching anything else. Nope, it was a huge boa constrictor no one knew about. I think it had died and that was the issue. He didn't have it in any proper tank so it clearly wasn't taken care of. A new kid moved a couple doors down. I befriended him, and he invited me round his house one day. He just went for a piss in the corner of his bedroom. He and his family were pretty messed up in hindsight. Yeah, I had some friends who lived in my neighborhood. They would wipe their asses on the shower curtain, so you'd go to use the bathroom and there were shit stains everywhere. As a kid I just thought they were gross, but there was probably a lot more going on there. A coworker had a few people over for drinks after work. She had 2 kids, and mentioned she'd just gotten 2 kittens for those kids ... who were 3 and 5. They ran around grabbing and dragging the kittens around, and later the coworker put them away. She then complained about how the kids and the kittens were too much, and how she directly regretted taking the kittens in. I heard constant meowing and asked if they were okay. She says, oh shit, I didn't feed them. Now, we both worked at a breakfast restaurant, worked all day, and had been sitting for a few hours by this point in the evening. I followed her to the room she put them in and you couldn't see the floor, covered in clothes, and the smell as you can imagine was that of a full room cat litter box. Poor things were locked in their own poop and pee. Hungry, with the lights off, I asked if she would consider letting me take them. She agreed and I came early the next morning to take them both. I've had them for 7 years now. I was at a dirty, sad house party and this girl opened a filthy closet to reveal her poor cat who had just given birth. Drunk with the music blaring, this chick grabbed the newborn kittens and started passing them around roughly to everyone standing around. She even shoved one in her pocket to emphasize how tiny they were. It was beyond horrifying. I knew almost nobody there, but out of nowhere this really nice guy I knew in high school emerged from the crowd and was as angry as I was about it. He returned to that nasty house every day for weeks to take care of the mama and kittens. When they were still too young to leave their mom but at least several weeks old, he and I found new homes for the kittens and each took one home. Sadly, the girl wouldn't let us take the mama cat. That's how I got my first cat ever, Megadeth. And she was a sweetheart but had awful anxiety issues. She also never grew to be more than 8 pounds and looked like a perma kitten. A few years later my dad almost killed her, but that little badass pulled through, after a month with a feeding tube inserted in her neck, and lived to be 14. She was a good girl and I miss her. My neighbor friend had a bucket in the corner of her room that she said was to relieve herself and when her parents locked her in. I was 7 and she was 9. We moved away shortly after and I didn't realize that this was not normal until several years later. I hope she made it to adulthood okay. I worked at an apartment complex. One of my jobs was to come in after someone moved out and do a maintenance assessment. It usually is pretty straightforward if they leave the apartment the way they got it. Normal wear and tear to check. The worst exception to this was an eviction. The living room was full of garbage intentionally. They had left their dog inside and didn't clean up after it. That was terrible, but the worst part was the kids' room. I can guess the kids were between 3-6 based on how high up the walls the crayon marks reached. The walls were covered as much as a kid could. If they were the age it seemed like they were, it would have taken a lot of uninhibited time to do. They must have drawn on the wall for months. The closet smelled like piss and the lock on the door faced out into the hallway. They had changed the knob around so they could lock their kids in their room. At that point, I assumed I was in an active crime scene and left to report it. I didn't get any follow-up since I had the main office report it, but the tenant's information was sent to the police and they saw the apartment in the condition I found it. All in all, it was very disturbing just to see the aftermath of what was obviously neglect. Yeah, I remember she always asked for a snack when she came over because her parents didn't always feed her. As a kid I only understood that her family had less than mine, not knowing that that doesn't just mean less money. I actually heard from her a few years ago it sounded like she was doing well. I had a friend like that growing up. My sister was friends with her sister, too. They lived right down the street from us. We were severely neglected and used to ask for snacks until their parents had them tell us they weren't allowed to give us anything anymore. They said it was too expensive and I get that. But now that I'm older I look back and wonder how they could stand us being around as often as we were, knowing that we were starving without ever thinking to report it or redirect us to somewhere else we could get food. Just wacky. My friend's mom, raging alcoholic, was really drunk and pulled a shotgun on us not knowing who we were, due to being blackout drunk. This was at like 3 p.m. in the afternoon. Technically it was my house, but my roommate had some friends over and they got really drunk. One of them decided to come into my room while I was sleeping and jump on top of my bed. He then proceeded to jokingly pull out his .45 handgun and point directly into my face and yelled and asked why I wasn't partying with them. Just watched a video yesterday of some people in their car. They're on FB Live or something. There's 2 in front and 1 in the back. A girl and 2 guys. The girl reaches for a gun to show the camera that she's a badass or something and the dude side-eyes her, says something and puts his hand on the gun like I don't trust you. She points the gun at him joking around and pulls the trigger. Shot in the head. Don't fuck around with guns. While not fucked up, this reminded me of my childhood best friend house and how it made me fear centipedes and millipedes. Growing up I didn't mind bugs. At school we would catch grasshoppers and play with daddy long legs. I'd play with ants at home in a bottle terrarium thing, but I had a best friend who lived in a mansion basically, so whenever we'd do sleepovers or hang out it would always be at his house because my family was poor and there was really nothing to do. Well, his giant house would always have the occasionally mealy centipede. I had never seen them before as my house just never had one that I noticed. So I didn't mind and thought they were weird worms. But my best friend hated them and he would always freak out and get his mom to take care of them, which would cause me to freak out since I didn't know why he was so scared of them. Well, one night a centipede fell on my head and ever since that day it gave me my fear of bugs. I used to be a flooring installer, so I've seen some wild shit in people's homes. I'll never forget this great big old townhouse though. The owner was making chili in a crock pot when we got there, told us if we needed the bathroom it was at the top of the steps and leaves. We noticed a horrific smell and realized that was the chili. He was using what smelled like rancid meat in it. Great. That'll be pleasant all day. We start pulling back the carpet for the transition to the new dining room floor and the carpet crackles. Move my hand and it's sticky. Turns out the carpet was saturated with ancient dog piss to the point it was gummy and the carpet backing was brittle. Go upstairs to wash my hands and there's a stale shit smell. Look over into the room beside the bathroom and it's totally empty. Except for the floor, which was covered in dog shit, some of it so old it was white. Hands down the most horrific house we ever went into. I don't even know why they bothered getting any new flooring. In the middle of the night my friend's mom comes into the bedroom, pulls my friend off the bottom bunk, and whoops the shit out of her with my friend screaming and crying asking what she did. The mom kept saying you know what you did. Never stayed another night there. The mom kept saying you know what you did. Every single time that was quoted to me as a kid, I honestly had no idea what I had supposedly done. Every time I actually found out what I had supposedly done, not often, I hadn't actually done it. I never once said that to any of my kids when they were growing up. WTF is up with people? My biological father would say this, even when I knew I did nothing wrong. He then would punish me for something my sisters or brother did. One time I asked him what I did to deserve getting beaten repeatedly and he said you exist. That pisses me off. Then he threw me across the room by my hair. Edit. I did not expect all of these responses. Thank you for the award. I'm due sorry to all of you who have had to deal with similar circumstances. May you all find peace in your hearts, minds and souls. I used to be the kid with the fucked up house frown. My mom boarded dogs out of my childhood home for money. There was always piss and shit everywhere. BC she took on more than she was capable of handling. Always loud and I couldn't go downstairs without gagging from the smell and getting jumped on by all the dogs that were walking through everything. Hated my life. Couldn't keep almost any friends, and I wanted to kill myself. She thought I was trying to take away her happiness by wanting a clean, quiet, calm home to live in. Don't have kids if you don't care about them, folks. This dude's mom had some kinda top half mannequin. I showed up at his house unannounced as was the style at the time. His mom or dad or somebody was outside and told me to just go right down. He was in the basement. So I guess, yeah, he should have been warned. He was in the basement in this back room, making out with the fake head thing. It was all dressed up too with makeup and other crap on it. It was like, I wish I hadn't let out a noise of surprise and could have just left him cause dude really freaked out that I saw him and I felt so bad. My friend was being a little bit annoying and his mom just turned around and slapped the bejesus out of him. Hard enough that he fell on the floor and couldn't hear out of his ear for a minute. She then proceeded to blame him for making her do it and started gaslighting immediately. It wasn't that hard. You feel the wrong way for it to be bad enough to scream about, etc., and dragged me and my brother in to try to justify it. I had forgotten about that until just now from this prompt. My best friend and I had been friends for probably 12 years at this point, so we were super close and our families were super close. Like would travel together for sports and things. Her parents were basically my parents. Her dad was this big guy and was super tough. He was scary if you didn't know him, but just a really big daddy bear at heart. We would usually spend the afternoons after school together since both sets of parents were working. So we ended up at her house this particular day. We walked in expecting no one to be home, but on her couch was her dad just sobbing uncontrollably. It took a while for him to catch his breath enough to tell us what happened. I guess someone walked into his work that day and shot a bunch of people and he lost like 3 of his closest friends. He was in shambles. My BFF just instantly started crying and jumped in her dad's arms. It was one of the most wholesome, yet scary and awkward things I have ever been witness to. Just seeing her dad, who I thought was Superman, breaking down and so vulnerable, and for such a fucked up reason, was so crazy. This was many years ago, but I was invited to swim in a friend's pool. She was someone I had just met through another friend of mine. The three of us are in her room changing into our swimsuits, and I noticed a bunch of used maxi pads laying open on her desk. I asked her what that was all about, and she very nonchalantly answered, "It's so my mom knows I'm not pregnant." We were maybe 12 at the time, and later that day I found out she had a batshit insane religious mother. Nothing crazy, but my friend was a bit of a slob and his parents were hoarders. He had a full-size trash can in his room and it was always full. His parent also had a wing of the home that was off limits, which meant he would take anyone and everyone back there when the opportunity presented itself. This is where the hoarders part comes in. While the rest of the house had nothing more than a bit of clutter behind that door, there was boxes, old newspaper, and various stuff everywhere. Also, the hall that lead to their room had a narrow pathway carved out with dust built up several inches to the side of it. The most shocking thing was their bed. It was visually lopsided to one side. They were big people and apparently this was the side they were intimate. To finish things off, they were apparently extremely active sexually. Good for them, I guess, because there were used spermicidal applicators everywhere. This was a lot to process as a 15-year-old. I'm rethinking the nothing crazy comment earlier. This literally made me cry. Poor lady. My grandma had Alzheimer's before she passed and it was hard to watch. We would go to the movies every other Friday, and one day we get back from watching Madagascar, and we're at her place and she's asking when we're gonna head out to the movies. But I remember it was small stuff like that, but still heartbreaking. She never got to the point with me where she forgot who I was, but she would scream and cuss at my mom a few times because she didn't remember who she was. I remember my mom just coming home, sobbing after helping her do all her shopping and cleaning around the place, only to get kicked out a few hours later out of nowhere. She was a super sweet lady though. It runs in our family and my mom is now showing signs, and I'm afraid one day she'll do the same and forget who I am. Frown. Such a sad disease. I can't imagine a sick fuck like that friend messing with someone with Alzheimer's. It made me angry as well. My grandmother had Alzheimer's, and I couldn't imagine doing that to her. I can only imagine what every day of that poor woman's life was like living there. If it makes you feel any better, Doug has since gone to prison. I haven't heard from Tyler since he got sent to an alternative school a few months after this took place. They were grade A pieces of SHT. Thank you. My papa suffered a couple of strokes and couldn't talk, and one of the things the family decided was that we keep him at home until he passed away a couple of years ago. Doug and Tyler would have come up missing if I had friends like that. Good on you for being a much better human than they could ever dream of being. A friend from middle school had parents who'd always get him dogs even though they didn't bother to take good care of them. My friend loved those dogs, but the parents would always let them out somehow and they'd run away. One day I went to his house and he told me about how his current dog got hit by a car, and half its body was smashed, and how bad he felt and all. I assumed the dog died and was disposed of, but he walked me to the backyard with a small plate of food for the dog. The parents had dug a shallow hole and threw the dog in there while it was still alive. I seen it withering while its lower half was being eaten by maggots. The next day he told me his dad had put it down himself. I don't like to imagine how. When I was 13, I was at a neighbor friend's trailer. We lived in the same park, and as I was hanging out, my friend's older sister got into a fight with her mom, started yelling that no one ever believed her, and dropped the bomb that her deaf uncle, Dad's brother, also living there, was molesting her at night. It was goddamn most uncomfortable situation I'd ever been in at the time. I wanted to leave immediately but was halfway through coloring in his older brother's really shitty tattoo he let us give him. Yay. My friend's idiot brother, who happened to be drunk, somehow thought because my buddy was a halfway decent artist, as far as drawing and whatnot, that he could give him a tattoo. So my buddy built a homemade tattoo gun and the motor went out shortly after he finished the outline, so we literally had to color in his tattoo in by hand, pinprick by pinprick. It covered his entire front shoulder. It was supposed to be a lion like from the crest of a medieval shield or something, but it turned out to be a giant black fucking blob, which I assumed got infected, but I don't know because I never went back there again. Went to meet a friend of a friend and to pick up some of their belongings as they had moved out. Mind you, this is the first time I was meeting this person. We walk in and he had 3 TVs and various computers set up in the living room, all with porn on them. Some had porn videos running and others had porn as screensavers. Apparently this was completely normal for this guy, and my friend didn't tell me about it first. After we left, my friend just shrugged and said that's what he does.